The frost had melted since dawn, and the sky stayed low all day, pressing like a hand over the prairie. Liam Carter, been for 14 and quieter than most, stepped down from the porch without a coat, the boards moaning underfoot, his breath fogging and vanishing as soon as it left his mouth. In his arms, he carried the patchwork blanket stitched by his grandmother, a worn, sun-faded thing with one corner torn where the dog had chewed. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. The barn sat at the edge of their land where the fence leaned tiredly, and the weeds had long since taken hold. Crows clustered there, watching. The air smelled of cold hay and old blood from butchering season. He heard nothing at first, just wind threading through the slats like fingers feeling their way. Then the sound came again, soft, not animal, not wind. He rounded the barn slow, boots crunching frost, and there she was. A woman lying half-curled beside the fence, her legs awkward, bare feet pale and cracked, the solace cut open like paper. She wore a buckskin dress, once beautiful, now soaked through. Her dark braid was matted and streaked with blood. Her chest rose so faintly, it might have been memory. For a moment, he thought she was dead. Then her eyelids fluttered. She blinked. Liam just stood there. She didn't move. Her lips were cracked so deep they bled and scabbed over. Her fingers clenched something small, a pouch beaded in blue and red. She clutched it like a prayer. Do you understand me?" He asked, no answer. Her gaze found him, unfocused and held. He looked back toward the house. The windows glowed with firelight. His father would be shaving bullets. His mother would be steeping tea. No one would miss him for a few minutes. He knelt. She winced, not from pain, but something deeper like shame. I got a blanket." She didn't answer, but her eyes stayed on his. He unfolded it slow. A wind kicked dust from the porch all the way down the fence line. He laid the blanket over her shoulders. She flinched as it touched her, then grew still. She stared at him, not like a person, but like something trying to remember what kindness felt like. He looked at her again. Really looked. She wasn't old. Not yet. Her face was hollowed by starvation. Her collarbone sharp as a knife's edge. There were purple welts across her wrists, half covered by torn cloth. Someone had tied her once. He opened his mouth to speak. Nothing came out. A crow cawed overhead. She blinked again, slower. Then her eyes closed. He didn't know if that meant peace or death. The wind picked up, colder now, whispering secrets he didn't understand. He backed away, stood, and returned to the house like a boy waking from a dream. That night's supper was quiet. His father cleaned the rifle twice, muttering about tracks too close to the west ridge. His mother kept her gaze on the stove. Liam didn't speak, but he kept glancing at the door, as if he'd left something outside. He dreamt of breathing that came in gasps, of blue beads scattered across snowdot at first light. He returned. She was still there, alive, barely. The blanket steamed slightly, damp from her breath. She hadn't moved much, but the pouch had shifted closer to her chest. He brought her water in a tin cup, and half a biscuit he'd hidden in his sleeve. She drank slow, blinking hard with every swallow. He whispered, "You got a name?" She didn't answer, but this time her eyes didn't wander. They fixed on him. She pointed to her chest. "Tula." Her voice was cracked bone and smoke. He tried to say it back. Then she coughed, and blood, dark, stained the blanket. "Don't die," he muttered. She looked past him toward the barn. He helped her up. Inside, it smelled like horses, and dust danced in beams of morning light. He made her a bed of straw in the back stall and covered her again. She curled into herself, and her eyes finally closed, not from pain, but trust. He watched her for a while, then slipped out the side door, ducking low. No one saw him return. Part 2. The watching eyes that afternoon. His father found him patching the fence with wire. You see them tracks yesterday? Yedodia asked. Liam nodded. You tell me if you see more. He nodded again, but he didn't tell him. That night, the wind shifted. The dogs didn't bark. Not once. But Liam didn't sleep. He sat up in bed, blanket wrapped around his knees. Something in his bones felt hollow, like something had been removed and not yet replaced. He rose, crept to the window. The stars were out, but the prairie didn't look right. He pressed his face to the glass. Nothing moved. Then in the far dark, he saw them. Not riders, not torches, just shapes, still and tall and waiting. He held his breath. The barn was lit inside, just faintly. A candle or a lantern. Someone else had lit it. He slipped his boots on, heart thudding. Outside, the frost was thicker now, crunching underfoot like brittle bone. He crept around the side of the house, past the chicken shed toward the barn. The door was ajar. Inside, she sat upright, awake. Her braid was untangled, the blanket still draped over her, but her eyes were clear now, ancient. You shouldn't be here, she said softly. You shouldn't be alive, he replied. Something passed between them then. Not words. Something quieter. She reached into the pouch and pulled out a carved piece of wood. An animal, he thought. A horse or maybe a buffalo. She pressed it into his palm. You saw me, she said. No one does. He stared down at the figure. A breeze stirred behind them. The horses in the stall snorted. The candle flickered. She turned her head sharply toward the east window. What is it? She didn't answer, but outside on the ridgeline, something shifted. Liam crossed to the window. There, dark against dark, he counted 3, then 5, then 8 figures, all still, all mounted, none moving, watching the barn. He stepped back, throat tight. Do they want you? She didn't move. They said I can go back, she whispered. He swallowed. Do you want to? I don't know. You don't have to decide tonight. She turned. I never thought I'd get to choose. He nodded. You gave me that. He stepped closer. So stay or go, but do it because it's yours now. She touched his cheek with calloused fingers. And if I stayed? Then I'd make sure the roof stops leaking. She laughed. It was the first time he'd ever heard her laugh with her whole body. That night, Yedodia built a new gate at the barn with Liam beside him. Maribel sewed a second blanket. The world did not shift all at once, but inside that barn, something had settled into place, not perfect, but right. When Liam rose before dawn the next morning, the wind was calm. The fire was still glowing, and beside it she sat waiting, not to run, but to begin. Part 8. The Harvest of Hearts. A year later, the barn would be rebuilt in cedar. A plaque would hang inside where the wind paused to listen. But for now, it was just a boy, a woman, and the warm hush of something true. The seasons turned as they always did, but the Carter homestead bore witness to changes that ran deeper than weather. Spring brought wildflowers that hadn't bloomed there before. Indian paintbrush and bluebonnets that Tula had planted with seeds from her pouch. Summer brought visitors, both Comanche and settler, drawn by stories of the peace that had taken root. Liam grew taller that year, his voice deepening, his hands growing sure with the work of building something lasting. But it was his eyes that changed most. They held a steadiness that came from seeing past the surface of things. From understanding that courage sometimes looked like nothing more than a boy with a blanket. Tula bloomed too, in ways that had nothing to do with healing and everything to do with belonging. She learned to make Maribel's cornbread and taught the older woman to weave grass into baskets that could hold water. She spoke both languages now, serving as a bridge when traders came through, when disputes needed settling, when understanding required more than words. The barn became a meeting place. Not officially, but naturally, the way rivers find their course. Families would stop there when traveling, sharing news and meals. Children played in the straw while their parents spoke of crops and weather and the delicate work of trust. One evening in late autumn, as the first frost threatened and the sky turned the color of old copper, Blue Antler returned. He came alone this time, his horse moving slowly across the familiar ridge. But there was no tension in his arrival, no gathering of warriors. Just an old man visiting friends. He sat by the fire with Yedodia and Liam, sharing tobacco and stories. Tula prepared stew, moving between the house and barn with the easy grace of someone who had found her place. The young one grows wise, Blue Antler observed, watching Liam tend the fire. He was always wise, Yedodia replied. Just took us a while to see it. The old chief nodded. The best lessons often come from those we think we should be teaching. Later, when the others had gone to bed, Liam and Tula sat alone in the barn. The autumn wind sang through the boards, carrying the scent of dying leaves and coming snow. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "That morning when you found me?" Liam considered the question. In the years since, their world had expanded in ways he never could have imagined. The simple act of giving had opened doors he hadn't known existed. It had brought challenges to suspicious neighbors, difficult conversations, the constant work of building bridges where walls had stood. "No," he said finally. "I regret that you were suffering. But I don't regret finding you." She smiled, the same soft expression that had rooted itself in his memory that first day on the ridge. "I used to think kindness was weakness," she said, "that the world would devour anyone foolish enough to show mercy. And now? Now I think maybe kindness is the only thing strong enough to change the world." A comfortable silence settled between them. Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall, each flake catching the lamplight like tiny stars. "The council is meeting again in spring," Tula said. "Blue Antler wants to establish formal trade agreements. Real peace, not just absence of war." Liam nodded. "Will you go?" "We will go," she corrected gently. "If you're willing." He looked at her, this woman who had arrived dying and stayed to help others live. This bridge between worlds who had shown him that courage could be as simple as seeing someone who needed help and choosing to act. "I'm willing," he said as the snow continued to fall, blanketing the prairie in pristine white. Liam thought about that morning a year ago. He had walked out to the barn, carrying nothing but his grandmother's old blanket, guided by nothing but the belief that suffering should not go unanswered. He couldn't have known then that this simple act would ripple outward like stones dropped in still water, that it would bring warriors to their ridge, not for war but for understanding, that it would transform a dying woman into a bridge between peoples, that it would teach a boy that the smallest gestures could carry the greatest power. The carved eagle she had given him sat on the windowsill now, its wings spread wide, catching the lamplight. Sometimes, when the wind was right, he could almost hear it singing, a song of hope carried on winter air, a promise that spring would come again. Outside, the snow fell steadily, covering the tracks of all who had passed this way. But inside the barn, warmed by firelight and the glow of something true, two unlikely friends sat planning for a future neither could have imagined. The blanket that had started it all hung on a peg nearby, patched and faded, but still warm, still ready to offer comfort to whoever might need it. Because that's what love did, it spread itself thin enough to cover the whole world. If you let it dot in the distance, a coyote called across the white prairie, its voice echoing off the hills where warriors had once knelt in recognition of a boy's simple mercy. The sound carried no threat now, only the ancient song of the wild, the eternal conversation between earth and sky that had witnessed it all, the fear and the hope, the walls and the bridges, the dying and the saving. And in a small barn on the edge of the frontier, two souls who had found each other across the vast distances of culture and circumstance continued the work that mattered most. The patient, daily task of choosing love over fear, understanding over suspicion, connection over separation. The story would be told for generations, how a boy's blanket became a bridge, how dying became living, how strangers became family. But for now, it was enough to sit by the fire, to plan for spring, and to know that sometimes the smallest act of kindness could change everything. The wind picked up outside, but the barn held firm, sheltering all it contained, the horses and the hay, the memories and the dreams, the hope that tomorrow would be better than today. And in the gentle glow of lamplight, surrounded by the promise of seasons yet to come, Liam and Tula continued their quiet revolution, one conversation at a time, one moment of understanding at a time, one act of love at a time. The blanket had been enough, but it was only the beginning. "Want to see?" He turned to her. "See what?" She looked at him then, not like a boy, but like a question. "That you gave me the blanket." He swallowed. "I just did what felt right. That's what they're afraid of." He didn't know who she meant. Not yet, but he would. Outside the line grew. More horses, more shadows, a stillness so deep it pressed against the wood. The prairie was holding its breath. And Liam, 14 and shivering in a barn with a woman who should have died, felt something ancient coil in his chest, like a string pulled tight by hands older than history. He stood by her side, and far across the frost the ridge filled with watchers waiting for dawn. Part 3. The growing silence by morning. The frost had gone brittle. It clung like lace to the cornstalks and blanketed the split rail fence in white. Liam moved through it like a ghost quiet, not because he had to be, but because it felt like the world required it, like even the trees were holding their breath. Around the barn he slipped through the side door with a tin pail of warm water, a strip of salt pork folded in paper, and the half loaf of bread he'd hidden beneath his mattress. His boots left small, careful prints that melted the frost only slightly. He was light, like his body hadn't quite settled into itself yet. 14, but more shadow than boy. She hadn't died in the night. Tula sat upright in the straw, one hand resting near the blanket he'd given, the other tucked protectively over her pouch. Her skin was shallow, lips cracked to bleeding, but her eyes had found strength, not health, but will. She watched him approach, didn't flinch. That alone felt like a kind of trust. He offered the water first. She took it with both hands and drank in slow, trembling gulps, as if the act of swallowing required more strength than her body had. When he gave her the pork, she only stared. "Eat," he said softly. "You need the salt. You're bleeding inside." She broke a piece off, eyes never leaving his face. Her fingers shook. "You speak more today," he said after a while. "Your voice sounds better." She looked at him. Not better. Less dying. He smiled, though it didn't reach far. "That's something." A long silence settled. Outside, crows cried over the field. Somewhere distant, a dog barked sharp and panicked. Then silence again. Liam sat on an overturned feed bucket, watching her eat slowly, reverently, as if tasting memory. "You got family?" he asked. She nodded once. He didn't press. "My mom is still alive," he added. "Father, too. I think they'd tell me not to help you." She chewed another bite, eyes fixed on her fingers. "You help anyway." He shrugged. "Didn't feel right leaving you. That's dangerous." "I know." That was all they said for a while. Her cough returned around noon, sharp enough to pull her whole body forward. Liam rose to catch her, steadying her shoulders as she gasped. The blanket slipped, revealing purple-black bruises across her ribs, some older than others. His hands froze. She noticed, pulled the blanket up. "I didn't mean to see," he whispered. "You did." "I won't tell anyone." "No need," she said quieter. "They don't care." Her voice wasn't bitter, just factual, like someone who'd already accepted the shape of how the world worked. She coughed again, and her body folded like paper. He poured more water. She drank, but didn't thank him. That wasn't how this was working. By mid-afternoon, he built a small fire in the feed trough. Smoke spiraled gently through the cracks in the roof. She warmed her hands over it, palms as thin as leaves. The smoke clung to her hair. Something about her face began to soften. Not from safety, but from remembering what it was. "You're not afraid of me?" she asked, voice rough. Liam shook his head. "I'm afraid of a lot of things. You're not one of them." She watched the flames a while, then whispered, "Even when I get strong?" He thought about it. "Are you planning to hurt me?" "No." "Then I'm still not afraid." She didn't speak again, but he noticed the way her fingers curled tighter around the blanket, as if that mattered more than anything she could say. The barn grew warm with the fire. The dusk came fast. The light outside bent gold through the slats, and the wind changed again. Distant hoofbeats echoed faintly against the ridges, and Liam's skin prickled. He moved to the door, cracked it just wide enough to peer out. There was no one, but the silence was thick now, like the prairie was waiting for something. Inside, she had started singing. Not loud, a hush song, lilting and low, the kind used to call spirits or cradle children. Liam didn't understand the words, but the sound threaded into his bones and sat there. "What does it mean?" he asked. She didn't look up. "It's for the dead and the lost." "You're not dead." She paused. "Maybe just lost." Night fell heavy. Stars sharp as nails overhead. The moon was a perfect curve of white, watchful and pale. He left her with more bread, then crept back to the house, slipping in through the cellar. His boots left faint marks on the kitchen stone. Upstairs, his parents argued in low voices about horses, about strangers, about tribes moving east, about signs. His father's voice was clipped. His mother sounded tired. They didn't know what was sitting in their barn, breathing and warming and healing on their boy's compassion. When he woke just past midnight, the wind carried something different now. Voices, not words, not English. The dogs weren't barking, and when the dogs didn't bark, that meant someone was already here. Part 4. The Test of Truth. The ridge was full. Dozens, maybe more, mounted, silent, unmoving, all of them watching a barn at sunrise. The wind bent the grass flat, and Liam stood behind the barn door, his heart tapping like rain on a tin roof. His breath fogged the air in front of him as he counted. First 10, then 20, then too many to keep track of. Their silhouettes stretched back along the ridge like shadows waiting to become men. Beside him, Tula stood wrapped in the patchwork blanket, hair loose, face expressionless. She looked out at them like one who had died and been forgotten, only to be remembered all at once by the sky itself. "Who are they?" he whispered. She did not answer. The barn was quiet. The horses inside shifted anxiously, hooves stirring straw. One let out a low, throaty whinny. "Are they here for you?" Liam asked again. Her jaw clenched, but her voice was even. "They are here to see what lives." It didn't make sense yet, but Liam was beginning to understand that not everything in the West came with clean answers. Some things just arrived in silence and waited to be seen by breakfast. The town had noticed. Dust rose from the far road as riders bolted from homesteads. The church bell rang, not for prayer, but as a warning. And still the ridge did not move. The warriors sat their horses like trees watching. Only their braids stirred in the wind. Eudodia Carter stood on the front porch with a loaded rifle and narrowed eyes. "They ain't moved a muscle," he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. "That many Comanche ain't rode out for peace in my lifetime." Maribel stood behind him, arms crossed tight, eyes darting toward the barn. "Maybe they're looking for someone." Yet's face hardened. "A settler?" "Doubtful." They came for blood, but even as he spoke it, there was doubt in his voice. This was not how war began. Not this quiet. Liam remained by the barn all morning. He chopped wood that didn't need chopping. He checked horses that didn't need checking. Anything to stay close. Every hour he looked up. They were still there. No closer, no farther. Just waiting. By mid-morning, a single figure detached from the line and began to ride down the ridge slow as molasses, without haste or fear. His horse was pale and scarred. The rider wore no war paint, only a weathered buffalo hide cloak. His hair was long, streaked with gray, and his expression was carved from riverstone. Tula saw him and inhaled sharply. The sound wasn't fear. It was recognition. "Do you know him?" Liam asked. She nodded. Blue Antler. He'd heard the name before. Whispered by traders, feared in saloons. A chief whose age made him dangerous, not because he fought, but because he remembered everything that had ever been done to his people. The old man rode up to the front gate and dismounted without a word. Jed stepped forward, rifle raised. "You got business here, Chief?" Blue Antler didn't flinch. He looked past him toward the barn. "I was told," he said, voice low and clear, "that one of our blood lay dying on this land, and that a settler's son gave her his only blanket." Jed said nothing at first. The wind tugged at his coat. "My son's been nowhere near your kind." The old man's eyes didn't blink. "Are you sure of that?" Maribel stepped forward. "If he did it out of pity." Blue Antler turned to her. It wasn't pity. It was honor. A silence fell heavy between them. From the barn shadow, Liam watched the moment swell. Blue Antler finally said, "We ask only to see her." Yedodia didn't lower the rifle. "And if we say no?" The chief didn't threaten. He simply looked up the ridge. Liam followed his gaze. Hundreds of warriors sat waiting. Blue Antler turned back. "We are not here for war, unless war is given to us." Liam stepped forward. He left the barn quietly, hands open, walking slow as the sun. His boots crunched dry earth with each step. Tula stayed behind, watching. Liam stopped between his father and the old chief. Yet's voice hissed, "Get back in the house, boy." But Liam didn't move. He turned to Blue Antler. "She's alive, barely, but I gave her the blanket." Yet's face went red. "Liam, she was going to die," he said louder now. "And she didn't, not yet." Blue Antler looked at him long and slow. "What made you help her?" Liam's voice trembled. "Because she looked like someone who'd been seen last by wolves." The chief nodded once. That seemed enough. Yedodia stepped back, uncertain now. Blue Antler did not smile, but his voice softened. "You were not born into this land, but you belong to it more than some who think they own it." Liam swallowed hard. "I didn't want to start anything." The chief raised a hand. "You started peace." Then, to everyone's surprise, he stepped away from his horse and knelt slow, deliberate. And high above on the ridge, the other warriors dismounted one by one. In silence, hundreds of Comanche bent to their knees. The sound of it, the faint shuffle of boots and bone and prayer, rolled like thunder down the valley. Yedodia lowered his rifle. His hand shook. Maribel's eyes filled. Liam just stood there, breath caught. Then Tula stepped forward out of the barn. Slowly, her body wrapped in the patched settler blanket, her face still gaunt, her legs trembling. But she walked alone toward the kneeling men, toward Blue Antler, and she fell not from weakness, but into his arms. He caught her, held her for a long moment, then stood, lifting her with ease. He didn't speak again. He didn't need to. Tula had come home. And yet she did not leave. Not yet. Part 5. The Covenant snow came 2 days after the riders vanished. Not a storm, not yet. Just a dusting, quiet and steady, turning the prairie silver under a pewter sky. The wind had changed direction again, and with it something in the house shifted too. Yedodia spoke less. Maribel stirred the stew longer than needed. Even the dogs barked with less bite. Liam hadn't spoken of what he saw, not the kneeling warriors, not the wooden eagle Tula had left in the straw, not the way she had smiled before turning. That was his, and it glowed inside him like a lantern kept under a blanket. But she had not left that morning. She was still in the barn. She had risen early and stood by the stall window, her breath fogging the wooden frame. The patched blanket hung from her shoulders, her face turned toward the hills that now held no one. She looked smaller somehow, tired in a different way. Liam watched from the loft ladder. He hadn't meant to spy, but something about her stillness held him. "You should go home," she said without turning. "Your mother will want your hands at the table." He climbed down anyway. "You slept enough. You should eat." She nodded but didn't move. He handed her the tin of dried apples he'd kept wrapped in cloth. She took one, holding it like it was foreign. "You going to stay long?" he asked, then immediately regretted it. Not because he didn't want her to, but because he didn't know if he had the right to hope. She looked at him now. Her eyes held something unreadable. "I shouldn't have stayed at all." He shifted. "They came for you." "No, they came for what I might have been." "You were theirs." She shook her head. "I was a burden, dead weight. They thought I was gone. I don't belong to anyone now." "You do," he said before thinking. Her silence bloomed between them. She returned her gaze to the snowy field. "Your kindness is too large for your frame, Liam." He flushed. "It's just a blanket." "No," she said. It was the first warmth I'd felt in months. He didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. Later, she swept the barn floor. It wasn't expected. She didn't ask permission. She just did it. And when Maribel came with a bucket of soup, the woman took it without thanks, but not without grace. That night, Liam's father said little. He stirred the fire and looked out the window long, as if waiting for someone who hadn't arrived. "She leaves soon," he muttered, though no one had asked. Maribel nodded, not looking up. "Let her choose when. She don't belong here." "No one does." "Jed, not really." And with that, the conversation ended. By the next morning, she was gone. The blanket folded, the pouch missing. Her tracks led toward the west ridge. Each step pressed soft into the snow. Vanishing by midday. Liam found the folded blanket inside the barn, still warm. His breath caught when he touched it. She hadn't said goodbye. That was what hurt, not the going, but the absence of a single word. He told no one. Let his father believe the world had righted itself. But Liam returned to the barn 3 times that day. Once to check the horses, once to check the blanket, once to check his own heart. Each time something inside felt emptier. That evening, as the snow picked up and the clouds thickened, Liam sat on the front porch in silence. His hands were tucked under his arms. The air bit his ears. The world felt hushed. "She meant something to you," Maribel said, stepping beside him. He looked up. "I don't know what she was. The kind of woman that makes a boy wonder what life could be like with someone watching him the way she did." He blinked. "She didn't watch me. She did, but softly, like someone seeing a memory too fragile to touch." He didn't answer. "She remember you, Liam. That's more than most folk ever get." That night he dreamed of smoke curling through tall trees, of a river running red, of a voice singing words he didn't understand. He woke before dawn, and when he opened the barn door the next morning, she was there curled on the straw again, face pale, shoulders shaking with a fever that hadn't been there before. He ran to her side, panic catching in his throat. Her skin burned. "I didn't mean to come back," she rasped. But the cold, he covered her with the blanket and yelled for his mother. Within minutes, the house came alive. Maribel helped him carry her inside. Yadodia said nothing, just stepped aside. They laid her on the cot in the parlor, and for 3 days, she drifted in and out of fever dreams. Liam sat by her side, wiping her brow with cool claws. whispering nonsense to fill the silences. She was halfway to the ridge, Maribel murmured one morning. Why? Something stronger than cold, she said. Something unfinished. On the fourth day, the fever broke. She opened her eyes to the soft yellow of lamplight and found Liam sleeping beside her cot, knees drawn to his chest, breath slow. She whispered his name. His eyes opened. You're back. I tried to leave, she said. I know, but I kept seeing the way you looked at me. Like I wasn't broken. You weren't. I was... Liam sat up. Not to me. She reached for his hand. He didn't flinch. Her fingers were weak, but warmer now. You shouldn't have followed me. I didn't, he said. I waited. Her breath caught. Why? He shrugged. Because sometimes people don't know they're allowed to stay. Part 6. The shadow returns. The rider came alone. No war paint, no torch, no banner. Just a dark figure riding slowly across snow that swallowed hoofbeats and hushed the world. Liam stood beside the porch rail, his breath clouding the air, hands curled against the cold. Behind him, Tula stepped out into the pale light, the quilted blanket around her shoulders and her hair loose against her back. Her eyes narrowed not in fear, but something deeper. Recognition, perhaps, or resignation. Yedodia emerged from the house with a rifle under one arm, but he didn't raise it. The way the rider moved told them all he wasn't there for violence. The horse stopped just before the fence line, steam rising from its nostrils. The man dismounted. He wasn't young. Scars marked his cheeks. His coat was wolfskin, too fine to be settler-made. He had the look of someone who had ridden far, not in distance, but in years. A man hunted by choices. He looked at Liam, then at the woman beside him. Liam, Tula said quietly, her voice tighter than it had been since she arrived. Go inside. He didn't move. The man stepped closer, his boots crunching snow. His gaze flicked toward Yedodia, who met it evenly. I didn't come to fight. Good, Yedodia said. You wouldn't win. The man nodded, then turned to her again. You left without finishing. I wasn't yours to finish, she replied. You vanished after the treaty. I ran after the bruises. His jaw tensed. That was not what I meant, but it's what you did. Liam looked between them, breath shallow. He could feel the storm beneath the quiet. The barn door stood behind them, slightly ajar, and in that moment, it felt less like a building and more like a witness. The man lowered his voice. You were promised to me. Tula nodded. By men who never asked if I agreed. You wore the red necklace. Because I was a child. Because I didn't know it meant I was owned. I never touched you in hate. You touched me in expectation, she said, fire flickering under each word. That's a slower kind of death. Yedodia shifted behind Liam. This is settler land. You said your piece. Leave now. The man's hand twitched near his belt, not for a weapon, but for the habit of reaching when cornered. He looked at Liam. Is this the boy? I am, Liam said quietly. The man studied him. You gave her a blanket. I gave her warmth. The man's lip curled. She belonged to us. Liam stepped forward. No, she belonged to no one. And maybe that's why you lost her. There was no shout, no raised voices, just cold breath, snow crunch, and the weight of too many years between the three of them. Tula didn't look away. She stood taller now. You came all this way, she said softly. And still you don't see me, the man exhaled. They'll come for you. Let them. You'll bring war. No, she said. You will, because you cannot stand to see a woman choose peace where she was meant to bleed. He stepped back like she'd struck him. His eyes burned for a second, and then he turned, swung into the saddle, and rode off without another word. The silence he left behind was heavier than gunfire. That night, no one spoke of what had happened, but something had broken loose. A thread pulled, a knot untied dawn at dawn, The barn door swung wide again, not from wind, but from movement, people. The first came on foot. A woman from town, hat in hand, eyes wary. Then a boy younger than Liam, holding a jar of canned pears. By midday, 5 more. By sunset, a dozen. They didn't say much, just looked at Tula like a story they'd heard once but never believed. Some offered gifts, some just sat. They didn't come to accuse. They came to see. Liam watched it all unfold with a strange ache inside him. Not pain, just a shift. A door opening. That night, she sat beside him in the barn, firelight warming her cheek. "You saved me twice," she said. "No, just once. The rest was you." She looked at him. "I almost left before I felt anything. It scared me." He nodded. "Me too. I've never been seen without being used." "Now you have." She smiled faintly. "I still don't know where to go." He looked around the barn. The roof leaked. The walls creaked. But the place held memory now, both weight and lightness. "Then stay until you do." She leaned against the post. "What about your family?" "They're already changing." Indeed, Eudodia had started leaving his rifle on the mantel. Maribel no longer looked through the curtains when a shadow passed. The dogs barked again, just not as often. Part 7. The Council of Hearts, one morning. 3 days later, the same ridge that had once held warriors now held wagons. 17 of them. Comanche. Not for war, for something else. A council. Blue Antler stepped from the lead wagon. When he saw Liam, he smiled in the way only men who have buried sons and forgiven enemies can. He approached the barn, stopped at the threshold. "She walks again." "She does." Blue Antler nodded. "And you?" Liam hesitated. "I think I've changed." The old man's eyes narrowed in gentle scrutiny. "Then you're becoming something worth remembering." Inside the barn, Tula stepped forward. She bowed her head to the chief, but not low, not like one beneath, but like one returning. They spoke in words Liam didn't know, but he watched their hands move, their eyes soften. And then Blue Antler turned to him. "The Comanche wish to make peace with this land, with this house. Not because we trusted, but because of what was done here." Liam looked down. "I didn't do much. You lit a fire in the snow. The council lasted hours. Not everyone agreed, but when the sun set, there were fewer walls between them. Representatives from both sides sat in a circle outside the barn." Blue Antler spoke first, his voice carrying across the hushed prairie like wind through tall grass. He told of treaties broken, of promises turned to ash, of children who would never come home. But he also spoke of hope fragile as a bird's egg, but real. Eudodia listened, rifle laid across his knees, but not aimed. When his turn came, he spoke slowly, choosing words like stones for a foundation. "I ain't a man of fancy speeches," he began. "But I seen my boy do something I couldn't. He saw past fear to what was right. Maybe that's what we all need to do." Maribel brought out bread and coffee. The simple act of sharing food seemed to soften the edges of old wounds. A young Comanche warrior, barely older than Liam, spoke of his sister who had been lost during the harsh winter. An old settler woman told of her husband, killed in a raid 5 years past. As the fire crackled and stars emerged like scattered seeds, something shifted. Not forgiveness, that would take time, but recognition. They were all trying to survive on the same hard land under the same vast sky. Tula sat quietly through most of it, but when the moon reached its peak, she stood. "I was dying when this boy found me," she said, her voice clear in the night air. "I had given up, but he saw me as someone worth saving, not because of my blood or my tribe, but because I was alive and needed help." She pulled the patchwork blanket tighter around her shoulders. "If a boy can see past everything that divides us, maybe we can too." Blue Antler nodded slowly. The young often see what age has clouded. An agreement was reached. That night, not a treaty signed with ink and ceremony, but something deeper. A commitment to try. To see each other as neighbors sharing the same wind and rain. The same struggles and hopes. When the Comanche wagons rolled away the next morning, they left behind something precious. The possibility of peace. That evening, as smoke curled from every chimney and frost kissed every window, Tula stood alone inside the barn again, looking toward the empty hills. Liam entered quietly. They